You are looking at Holmes County, Ohio. Population approximately 26,000. No traffic lights, no power lines running to the houses, no drive-thrus, no pharmacies on every corner, no cancer screening billboards lining the roads. In the late 1990s, a team of researchers from Ohio State University drove into Holmes County with clipboards and a hypothesis. The Amish, they believed, would have elevated cancer rates, intermarriage within a closed population, limited access to screening, no modern medical intervention. Every statistical model they had pointed toward one outcome. They spent 6 years interviewing 92 Amish families. They cross-referenced death certificates. They pulled the Ohio Cancer Registry. They checked their numbers 3 times because the first 2 didn't make sense. The cancer rate was not elevated. It was not even average. It was 60% of the rate for the surrounding Ohio population and 56% of the national rate. They went in expecting to find a population devastated by cancer. They found a population that barely knew what a cancer diagnosis looked like. The American cancer treatment industry generates $210 billion every single year. In 2010, a team of researchers at Ohio State University handed it the most inconvenient data it had ever seen. Here's what they found, and here's exactly what happened next. The number is 60, not 60% survival rate, not 60% treatment success. The Amish cancer incidence rate is 60% of the surrounding Ohio population, meaning for every 100 Ohioans who develop cancer, 60 Amish people do. That is not a marginal difference. That is not statistical noise. That is a 40% reduction in one of the leading causes of death in America. It sits inside a community that has never paid for a gym membership, never bought a supplement, never followed a protocol. The study was published in Cancer Causes and Control, a peer-reviewed journal out of Ohio State University's Comprehensive Cancer Center. Lead researchers were Dr. Judith Westman and Dr. Amy Furkatich. The study covered 9,992 Amish adults in Holmes County between 1996 and 2003. They looked at 24 different types of cancer. Of those 24 types, 7 came back with numbers so low they were statistically impossible to dismiss. Cervical cancer, laryngeal cancer, lung cancer, oral cancer, melanoma, breast cancer, prostate cancer. All of them were dramatically reduced. Here is the detail that makes this study impossible to explain away. The Amish do get skin cancer at higher rates than the surrounding population. They work outdoors without sunscreen from childhood. The data found it. The researchers reported it. That one fact matters because it proves nobody cherry-picked these numbers. The study found what was actually there, and what was actually there across almost every other cancer category was near absence. That number, 60%, has been sitting in a peer-reviewed journal published by one of America's most respected universities since 2010. Your oncologist has almost certainly never mentioned it. The researchers identified 5 specific factors that separated the Amish cancer rate from everyone else's. Not one. Not a theory. 5 measurable, documentable, reproducible factors. Each of them costs nothing. None of them requires a prescription. The first is tobacco. The Amish Ordnung, the unwritten community code that governs every aspect of Amish life, prohibits tobacco use entirely. No cigarettes, no chewing tobacco, no cigars. Tobacco-related cancers in America account for roughly 30% of all cancer deaths every year. The Amish tobacco-related cancer rate in the Ohio study was 37% of the surrounding Ohio population's rate. Remove tobacco from a community completely, and the cancer math changes immediately and permanently. But here is the number the industry does not want you to focus on. The non-tobacco related cancer rate in the Amish was still 72% of Ohio's rate, meaning even after you account for the tobacco factor entirely, the Amish are still getting significantly less cancer than everyone around them. Something else is happening. The second factor is processed food. The average Amish family grows, preserves, and prepares almost all of their own food. No seed oils, no high fructose corn syrup, no artificial preservatives, no chemical flavor enhancers, no ingredients list that requires a chemistry degree to read. The The average American adult consumes 57 pounds of added sugar per year. The average Amish adult, effectively zero, not reduced, zero. The third factor is physical labor. The Amish do not exercise, they work. There is no gym in Holmes County. There is a farm. Research published in the British Journal of Cancer found that daily physical activity reduces the risk of colon cancer by up to 24%. The Amish average between 14,000 and 18,000 steps per day as a baseline function of ordinary life, not as a wellness routine, as Tuesday. The fourth factor is hormonal contraception. The Amish do not use the pill, they never have. A landmark study published in a major medical journal tracking over 1 million women across 13 years found that hormonal contraceptive users faced a 23% increased risk of depression and demonstrated measurable associations with certain cancers. The Amish women in the Ohio study showed dramatically lower breast and cervical cancer rates specifically. The fifth factor is chemical exposure. No synthetic pesticides on their crops, no industrial cleaning chemicals in their homes, no dry cleaning compounds in their clothing, no decades of accumulated environmental toxin load from living inside a processed modern lifestyle. The Amish home cleaning arsenal, soap, vinegar, baking soda. None of this required a pharmaceutical patent. None of it cost more than $2 a day. And every single one of these factors was already documented in the Ohio State study, sitting in the data, waiting for someone to act on it. The Amish did not design a cancer prevention system. They designed a life. The cancer prevention was a side effect. Nobody in an Amish household tracks macros, nobody reads a nutrition label, nobody follows a 12-week protocol. They eat what they grow, they rest when the sun goes down, they move because the farm requires it. They never adopted the industrial habits that the rest of America built its entire daily routine around after 1950. Here is what that looks like in practical, specific terms. An Amish breakfast is eggs from chickens that live in the yard, vegetables from a garden planted 20 feet from the back door, whole grain bread made without industrial additives, without preservatives, without the 18-ingredient list on the side of a grocery store loaf. There is no breakfast cereal, no orange juice from concentrate, no coffee creamer with partially hydrogenated oils. The meal takes 15 minutes to prepare from scratch and contains no ingredient that was manufactured in a facility. An Amish workday produces 14,000 steps before noon, not on a treadmill, but in a field, in a barn, carrying things, building things, moving through a physical world that requires the body to actually function. There is no sitting at a desk for 8 consecutive hours, no fluorescent lighting, no processed lunch from a sealed package. An Amish evening involves the family eating together at a table. No screens, no processed snacks. Sleep follows darkness. The average Amish adult sleeps 8 hours. Sleep deprivation is one of the most consistent environmental factors that researchers have linked to elevated cancer risk over the last 2 decades of study. Now here's the mechanism that the medical establishment cannot study with a single randomized controlled trial. The Amish removed every modern industrial habit simultaneously, and the scientific community studies one variable at a time. Remove smoking, cancer drops slightly. Add exercise, cancer drops slightly. Each intervention in isolation produces a modest result. The Amish did not make one change. They never made the changes in the first place. The effect of removing every variable at once is not additive, it is multiplicative. And the number sitting in the Ohio State study, 60%, is what multiplicative looks like. What the Amish have is not a secret formula. It is the absence of everything that the modern industry introduced after 1950 and profited from every year since. If you have ever wondered why every cancer conversation ends with a treatment plan and never with what the Amish have been doing for 200 years, subscribe before we continue. Because the next part of this video is where the data stopped moving. Not because it was wrong, because of what it would have cost the industry that found it. December 23rd, 1971. Richard Nixon walks into the East Room of the White House and signs the National Cancer Act. He calls it a war on cancer. He promises the country a cure within 5 years. He tells the American people that the full resources of the federal government are being committed to ending this disease. What the National Cancer Act actually created was an industry. The funding mechanism was this. The National Cancer Institute received a massive increase in federal money. That money went primarily to treatment research, including surgery protocols, chemotherapy development, radiation therapy, and pharmaceutical drug trials. Prevention research received a fraction of that investment. Lifestyle intervention research, the kind of study that would have looked at why populations like the Amish showed dramatically different outcomes, was not where the pharmaceutical industry's money went. Because the pharmaceutical industry cannot patent a lifestyle, you cannot charge $50,000 for a treatment cycle of not eating processed food. You cannot bill insurance for recommending that a patient walk more and sleep 8 hours. There is no revenue model for the Amish system. There is a $210 billion annual revenue model for the system that treats cancer after it develops. The Ohio State study was published in 2010. It received significant media coverage for approximately 3 weeks. The Columbus Dispatch ran it on the front page. It circulated through research communities. Researchers called it fascinating. They called it promising. They called it a finding that required further investigation. The further investigation was never funded at scale. The reason is not complicated. The study's conclusions pointed directly at lifestyle factors: food, movement, tobacco, chemical exposure. Those conclusions cannot be converted into a patentable product. The research that gets funded in America is the research that produces something a company can sell. A finding that says remove processed food does not produce a product. It eliminates the need for one. The average chemotherapy course in the United States costs between $10,000 and $200,000, depending on the cancer and the protocol. The pharmaceutical industry generated $210 billion in cancer drug revenue in 2023 alone. The Amish system generates zero. It requires no prescription. It creates no repeat customer. It has no billing code. The data from Holmes County was not suppressed in a dramatic way. It was simply never funded again. And in the research world, unfunded means unseen. While the Amish data sat in a journal, the cancer industry built an infrastructure moving in the exact opposite direction. In 1975, 4 years after Nixon signed the National Cancer Act, high fructose corn syrup began its introduction into the American food supply at industrial scale. By the mid-1980s, it was in the majority of packaged food products. Today, it appears in over 75% of packaged American food. In Holmes County, the Amish food supply had not one product containing it. Between 1971 and 2023, the United States spent over $700 billion on cancer drug development. That investment produced meaningful advances in certain blood cancers and some localized tumors. For the most common and most deadly cancers, the results were modest. Pancreatic cancer. 5-year survival in 1975 was 3%. Pancreatic cancer 5-year survival today is 13%. 50 years, 10 percentage points, $700 billion. The average American home in 2024 contains over 62 different synthetic chemical compounds in cleaning products alone. Sprays, detergents, fabric softeners, drain cleaners, air fresheners. The Amish home has had 3 cleaning agents for 200 years: soap, vinegar, baking soda. In 1960, approximately 10% of American farmland was treated with synthetic pesticides. Today, over 90% of American farmland is treated with synthetic pesticides. The Amish farms in Holmes County have had 0 synthetic pesticides applied in 200 years of continuous cultivation. Every single industry that expanded after Nixon's 1971 act expanded in the opposite direction from what the Amish data showed, and those choices produced higher cancer rates. The food industry grew by selling processed food. The agricultural industry grew by selling synthetic chemistry. The pharmaceutical industry grew by selling treatment for conditions that a different set of choices might have prevented. The cancer industry did not bury the Amish data in a room somewhere. It simply built an entire economy pointing the other direction and funded the research that supported that economy. The Amish system is not a supplement. It is not a protocol. It is not something you purchase. It is a set of removals. And based on what the Ohio State data actually shows, here is what those removals are in order of documented impact. The single highest impact removal is tobacco. The Amish tobacco-related cancer rate is 37% of the Ohio adult rate. If you use any form of tobacco, that is the number. That one removal produces a measurable, documented, statistically significant reduction in cancer risk. This is not a disputed finding. It is one of the most replicated results in medical research. The Amish community proves what happens when an entire population never starts. The second removal is ultra-processed food, not moderation, removal. The Amish do not have a moderate relationship with seed oils or high fructose corn syrup. They have no relationship with them. The replacement is not a special diet. It is food that existed before 1950, meat, vegetables, grains, dairy, eggs, grown or raised within a mile of where you eat it. The shift is not expensive. It is different. The third removal is sedentary time. The Amish do not add exercise to their day. They remove the conditions that require it. They do not sit still for 8 hours and then spend 30 minutes on a machine compensating for it. Their baseline activity, the minimum required to live their daily life, exceeds what most Americans achieve in a dedicated workout session. You do not need to replicate this exactly. You need to understand what it produces and move in that direction. The fourth removal is synthetic chemical contact, cleaning products, synthetic fragrances, plastic food containers that leach compounds into food over time. Each individual change is small. The compound effect of reducing your daily synthetic chemical load across decades is what the Amish data is actually measuring. None of these changes require a prescription. You do not need to move to Holmes County. You need to understand what the people living there removed 200 years ago and remove as much of it as your life currently allows. The study data is available. The journal is public. The researchers put their names on it. The data has been in the public record since 2010. The question the Amish data asks is simple. If a community that removed every modern industrial habit has a cancer rate 40% lower than the people living directly around them, what exactly is causing the other 40%? The study is real. The data is published. Dr. Judith Westman and her team at Ohio State put their names on it. 15 years later, the conversation in the average doctor's office has not changed. If you grew up being told that cancer is genetic, that it is random, that it is largely unavoidable until you get the diagnosis, and you are now looking at a community with a 40% lower cancer rate that never changed anything except the industrial habits they refused to develop in the first place, you already understand what this video is telling you. One question for the comments. Based on the 5 factors in this video, tobacco, processed food, physical labor, hormonal drugs, synthetic chemical exposure, which one could you remove or reduce this week? Not all of them. 1. Tell me below. And if you believe the data that gets ignored is the data most worth finding, subscribe, because there is more of it, and the next one goes further back than 1971.